Every year, the students of Hollowbrook Middle School made a tradition out of visiting Old Man Garrick's pumpkin patch, a sprawling field just on the edge of town, right before Halloween. For as long as anyone could remember, kids would laugh, race each other through the rows of pumpkins, and carve silly faces into them. But there was a darker side to it. A whispered rumor, something every kid heard but never spoke aloud. If you didn't leave the patch before sundown, you never came back. Jenna had always brushed off the story. She was a skeptic by nature. That's why she was standing in the middle of the patch now, while the orange glow of sunset bled into the horizon. Her two best friends, Logan and Maddie, were with her, nervously glancing around. "Come on, Jenna," Maddie urged, her voice shaking. "We should head back. You've heard the stories." Logan shifted uneasily, his usual bravado cracked by the growing darkness. "Yeah, maybe we should listen this time." Jenna rolled her eyes, kicking a large pumpkin with her foot. "It's just a stupid legend. You guys actually believe Old Man Garrick cursed this place? Please." But her voice was thin, and her stomach twisted in knots she couldn't explain. She was determined to prove that she wasn't scared, that this was just another dumb tradition meant to freak out the younger kids. Still, the air felt heavier now, the laughter from earlier in the day fading into an unsettling silence. Even the wind, which had been breezing through the patch all afternoon, seemed to have stopped. The three stood in the vastness of the pumpkin field, the last of the daylight quickly being swallowed by an eerie twilight. Jenna tried to laugh off the feeling of unease creeping up her spine, but every second that ticked by felt wrong. There was something off about the patch now. The pumpkins looked more like sinister figures than decorations, their jagged shadows stretching unnaturally long as the light dimmed. Maddie's voice broke the silence. "What time is it? We should go." Her voice quivered on the verge of panic. She wasn't usually like this. Maddie was the calm one, always keeping her head. But tonight she looked pale, her eyes darting to the woods surrounding the patch like she was waiting for something to appear. Jenna pulled out her phone to check the time. Dead. It was fully charged an hour ago. "Anyone else have a phone?" she asked, her voice faltering just a little. Logan reached for his phone and cursed under his breath. "Mine's dead too. Maddie?" Maddie's hands trembled as she pulled hers out. "No signal." The wind picked up suddenly, sharp and cold, carrying with it a faint whisper that none of them could place. Jenna's heart pounded, her breath quickening. This was ridiculous. But the fear gnawed at her, relentless and growing by the second. "We need to go," Logan said, more forceful this time, his bravado completely gone. His eyes darted to the path leading out of the pumpkin patch, now almost invisible in the twilight. As they began walking toward the exit, the whispering grew louder. It was faint at first, barely noticeable, but soon it became an unmistakable chant, soft, eerie voices riding the wind. "Leave, leave, ... It was everywhere, surrounding them, coming from the trees, from the ground, from the pumpkins themselves. Jenna's pulse quickened. She forced herself to keep walking, but every step felt heavier, like the ground was pulling her in. Her legs shook beneath her. Her chest tightened with a strange, suffocating dread. This was real. Something was very wrong. Maddie suddenly screamed, freezing in place. Jenna and Logan whipped around to see what she was looking at. Maddie's finger pointed shakily toward the far end of the pumpkin patch, where a figure stood between the rows. It was too far away to make out clearly, but its outline was unmistakable. A tall, shadowy figure just standing there, watching. Who is that?" Logan stammered, his voice trembling. Jenna's mouth went dry. Her heart pounded so loudly in her ears she could barely think. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, staring. "We need to run," Maddie whispered, barely audible, but her terror was palpable. Logan didn't need any more convincing. He grabbed Jenna's arm and yanked her into a sprint. Maddie followed, the three of them tearing through the pumpkin patch, feet stumbling over vines and uneven ground. The whispering grew louder, more urgent. "Leave, leave, leave." They raced toward the path, the air thick with panic. The sun had fully disappeared now, leaving only a thin sliver of orange on the horizon. Jenna's legs burned. Her lungs felt like they were about to burst, but she kept running. She had to. Suddenly, Logan tripped and fell hard to the ground, taking Jenna down with him. Maddie skidded to a stop, her eyes wide with fear. Jenna scrambled to her feet, pulling Logan up, but as she did, she saw something that made her stomach plummet. The pumpkins, the ones they had passed just moments ago, were moving. Slowly, they began to twist and contort, their carved faces warping into grotesque expressions, the flicker of light from inside glowing more intensely. "We have to go! Now!" Jenna screamed, dragging Logan to his feet. But it was too late. The shadowy figure was now much closer, only a few yards away. And worse, more figures were emerging from the trees, stepping out from the darkness like they'd been waiting. Their faces were blank, featureless, but their eyes burned with an unnatural glow. Jenna froze. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't real. The whispering reached a fever pitch, echoing all around them. "Leave, leave, leave." Logan stumbled forward, gripping Jenna's arm so tightly it hurt. "We have to get out of here," he gasped, his voice breaking. But they were surrounded. There was nowhere to run. The figures closed in, and the pumpkins, those horrible twisted pumpkins, watched with their glowing eyes. Suddenly, Maddie screamed. A figure had appeared behind her, its long, spindly fingers reaching out. Jenna tried to move, but she was frozen, paralyzed by terror. The last thing she saw before everything went black was Maddie being dragged down into the earth, her screams echoing in the cold night air. The next morning, the town was buzzing. 3 kids had gone missing in Hollowbrook, just like they had every year. And just like every year, no one would talk about it. No one ever spoke of the pumpkin patch, or the fact that it claimed a few students every Halloween. But deep in the fields, among the rows of pumpkins, 3 new twisted faces had appeared, carved into the largest pumpkins of them all, each one bearing a chilling resemblance to the missing students. The pumpkins were always hungry. "Just 5 more minutes, Mom. Please," Harper pleaded, her voice tinged with desperation. She stared wide-eyed at her mother, already standing with one hand on her hip and the other on the door handle of the old station wagon. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the pumpkin patch, and the air had grown sharp with the coming chill of the night. "You said that 20 minutes ago," her mother replied, eyes narrowing. "I'm not waiting any longer, Harper. It's getting late. Please, just a little longer," Harper insisted, her hands clasping in front of her like a prayer. Her 2 friends, Emma and Liam, stood by awkwardly, waiting. Harper knew they didn't want to leave either. They just didn't dare ask. With a sigh, her mom gave in. 5 more minutes. After that, we're going. Harper flashed a triumphant smile at her friends. "See? Told you she'd let us stay." They darted off, laughing, leaving her mom behind by the car. The 3 ran deeper into the pumpkin patch, the corn stalks and vines crunching beneath their feet. The farther they went, the less noise they could hear from the other families, and the looming shadows of the pumpkins gave everything a strange, eerie look. Harper felt her heart racing, but she wasn't scared. At least not yet. There was a thrill in the air, a sense of adventure. "We have to find the biggest one," Liam shouted, eyes scanning the rows of pumpkins as if he could spot the perfect one from a mile away. Emma giggled nervously. "This place is kinda creepy at night, don't you think?" Her voice was softer now, like she was trying not to show how uncomfortable she was. "That's what makes it fun," Harper said with a grin, though deep down, something felt off. She ignored it. This was the pumpkin patch they'd come to every year. Nothing had ever happened here. They finally found it. A massive, gnarled pumpkin sitting alone in the farthest row. Its rough skin looked more like bark, and its shape was strange, almost as if it had grown twisted. "This one," Harper declared, her voice filled with triumph as she knelt down beside it. But when she touched it, her skin crawled, the surface cold and damp like flesh. She yanked her hand back quickly, her heart skipping a beat. "Weird," she muttered, shaking off the uneasy feeling. "I don't know about this one." Emma's voice trailed off as she stared at the pumpkin. Liam, always the brave one, stepped forward and kicked the side of the giant pumpkin. "What's the big deal?" "It's just a pumpkin." But the moment his foot connected, a faint echo sounded from inside. Hollow. The laughter stopped. "Did you hear that?" Harper whispered, her throat tightening. She glanced at her friends, both of whom were frozen in place. There was something wrong with this pumpkin. "Maybe we should leave," Emma suggested, her voice wavering. Her eyes darted to the horizon. The sun had almost fully set now, and the once vibrant orange sky was bleeding into deep purple and black. Liam bent down, his curiosity getting the better of him. "No, wait. I want to see what's inside." His hands reached out, and he dug his fingers into the top of the pumpkin, trying to pry it open. As he pulled, the skin of the pumpkin peeled back like it was being unwrapped. Harper's stomach turned as the smell hit her. It wasn't the usual earthy smell of pumpkins. This was rancid, like rotting meat. "Liam, stop!" she shrieked, her voice breaking with fear. But Liam was already too deep. He tore back the top, revealing not the usual pumpkin guts, but something else entirely. A black oozing mass that writhed and shifted as if it were alive. Harper's blood ran cold as she realized what it was. Maggots. Thousands of them. Liam recoiled, his face twisted in disgust, but before he could react, a sickening sound rose from the pit of the pumpkin. A low, gurgling growl. The three of them backed away slowly, hearts pounding in their chests, eyes locked on the grotesque sight. "Run," Harper whispered, her voice barely audible. But it was too late. From the writhing mass in the pumpkin, something long and skeletal began to rise. Its form was grotesque, twisted like the pumpkin itself, with spindly limbs and a skull-like face. The creature stood tall, towering over them, and as it moved, the maggots fell from its body like raindrops. Harper's legs refused to move, paralyzed by terror. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body wouldn't obey. She could only watch as the thing slowly lifted one of its bony arms, reaching toward them. Emma was the first to break free, her voice cracking as she screamed, "Go!" She grabbed Harper's arm, yanking her back to reality. They bolted through the rows of pumpkins, the creature's growls growing louder behind them. Harper's heart pounded in her ears, drowning out everything else. Her legs burned as she ran, her lungs screaming for air. Liam was behind them, gasping, his face pale and drenched in sweat. Was it following them? Was it getting closer? She didn't dare look back. When they finally reached the car, Harper's mom was already there, tapping on her phone with a casual glance up. "You three ready now? What took so long?" Harper slammed into the car door, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Mom, we need to go now. There's something." But her mother wasn't listening. She glanced up, her eyes blank, emotionless. "Oh, Harper, you should have left earlier," she said in a monotone voice, her gaze unnerving. Harper's blood froze as her mother's lips curled into a strange, hollow smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. Then, she saw it. A flash in the rearview mirror. The creature. It was right behind them. But something was wrong. Harper's mom reached out, her fingers icy cold as she touched Harper's shoulder. "You're not leaving, sweetheart. No one ever leaves after sunset. That's the rule." Harper's heart stopped. She looked into her mother's eyes. No, not her mother. Not anymore. And that's when she realized they were never going to make it out. Not tonight. Not ever. The crisp autumn air felt perfect for a trip to the pumpkin patch, but if you asked Derek, this was the worst idea ever. He swatted a bug off his neck for the 5th time in as many minutes. "Why are there so many mosquitoes out here?" he complained, side-eyeing his girlfriend Vanessa as she strolled ahead of him. "Maybe they like your blood because you're so bitter," Vanessa teased, tossing a playful wink over her shoulder. "Yeah, bitter about being out here with no Wi-Fi and having to pick a squash." "Great Saturday, babe," Derek grumbled, dragging his feet through the thick mud. Behind them, their friends Mia and Travis burst into laughter. "Come on, man, it's a pumpkin, not the end of the world." Travis slapped Derek's back, almost causing him to trip. "Speak for yourself," Derek shot back. "I could be at home, ordering pizza, binge-watching something with an actual plot. But nope, we're here, stuck in a maze of oversized vegetables." Mia doubled over, laughing. "Derek, if you put as much effort into having fun as you do into complaining, you'd be winning at life." Vanessa grinned as she took Derek's hand. "Look, just find the perfect pumpkin for our porch, and I'll make your favorite dessert tonight. Deal?" Derek perked up at that. "Pumpkin pie? Maybe," she said with a mischievous smile. "Or maybe something even better." "All right, deal," Derek agreed, rolling his eyes with a grin. "I'll find the biggest, ugliest pumpkin they've got, just for you." The group meandered deeper into the patch, laughing and making jokes about the pumpkin's ridiculous shapes. Some were short and squat like a couch potato, while others looked like they'd been stretched by a medieval torture device. But as they ventured farther, the patch grew denser, the pumpkins larger, and the laughter gradually faded. "This part of the patch looks kinda weird, doesn't it?" Mia remarked, glancing around at the crooked pumpkins that seemed to tilt unnaturally on their vines. "Yeah, it's like they stopped growing normally over here," Travis agreed, stepping closer to inspect one. "Look at this thing. It's like lumpy." Vanessa and Derek stopped too, both now feeling the subtle shift in atmosphere. The wind picked up slightly, making the dried leaves rustle louder than they had before. Derek suddenly felt uneasy, the warmth of the earlier sun fading faster than it should have. "Weird is one word for it," Vanessa muttered, glancing at a pumpkin that was almost twice the size of the others. Its surface was deeply ridged, and dark, twisted vines snaked out from its base, tangled in odd shapes. "All right, let's just grab one and get out of here," Derek suggested, his previous bravado gone. The whole patch now had a sinister feeling, the kind of place you'd see in a bad horror movie. Travis laughed nervously. "You scared, Derek? I thought this was your jam bad movies and creepy places." "Yeah, except in movies, the creepy stuff doesn't actually happen." Derek shot back, trying to sound lighthearted but failing. As they turned to leave, the ground suddenly trembled underfoot. Just a light rumble, but enough to stop them all in their tracks. Mia looked around, eyes wide. Did you guys feel that?" Before anyone could respond, a low, guttural sound echoed through the field. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't an animal. It was something far more menacing, like the earth itself was groaning in protest. Vanessa's grip tightened on Derek's hand. "What the hell was that?" she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. Suddenly, the largest pumpkin in front of them started to twitch. Slowly at first, then more violently, as if something inside it was trying to break free. "Okay, I'm out." Derek turned, yanking Vanessa along with him as they bolted for the entrance of the patch. Mia and Travis followed close behind, their laughter completely gone. But the pumpkin patch wasn't done with them. The vines, those dark, twisted vines, began to writhe across the ground, stretching toward them like long fingers. Mia tripped, catching her foot in one of the vines, and let out a scream. Travis skidded to a stop to help her, but the vine pulled tight, dragging Mia toward the gigantic pumpkin. "Help me! It's pulling me!" Mia screamed, frantically trying to free her leg. Travis yanked at the vine with all his strength, but the harder he pulled, the tighter it wound around her ankle. Derek and Vanessa turned back, eyes wide with terror, but they were frozen in place. The gurgling sound returned, louder now, and the ground beneath the giant pumpkin began to crack and shift. The pumpkin split open, its insides nothing but a black, tar-like ooze. And from the pit of the ooze, something began to emerge. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something else. A massive, deformed shape with hollow, glowing eyes and a mouth full of sharp, jagged teeth. The creature clawed its way out of the pumpkin, dragging its twisted body across the ground, heading straight for Mia. She screamed louder than Derek had ever heard, her voice shrill and raw. "Help me!" she shrieked, kicking and flailing, but the vines dragged her closer to the creature. Travis fought harder, but it was no use. The thing was too strong. The creature let out a screech so piercing it rattled their bones, and with a swift motion, it lashed out, wrapping its grotesque, dripping arms around Mia. "No!" Vanessa screamed, pulling Derek back as the thing dragged Mia into the pumpkin's gaping maw. Her screams were abruptly cut off, leaving nothing but the wet, sloshing sound of the creature swallowing her whole. The silence that followed was suffocating. No one moved. No one spoke. The vines, now still, let Travis fall to the ground, trembling. "We need to go now," Derek shouted, yanking Vanessa with him as they sprinted out of the patch, leaving Travis behind, still kneeling in shock. He didn't move, didn't even react as Derek and Vanessa disappeared into the darkness. But before they could reach the road, Derek skidded to a stop, his heart plummeting. There, standing at the entrance to the pumpkin patch, was Mia, whole, unharmed, and smiling. But something wasn't right. Her eyes. Her eyes were glowing, just like the creature's had been. "We shouldn't have stayed past sunset," she said, her voice soft but chilling. "It's their time now." Derek and Vanessa stared at her in horror, realizing too late that the Mia they knew was gone. And they were next.